Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalrin, and with Christmas craziness, I haven't even been able to stream for Christmas Eve and on Christmas Day. I've been really taking the time to just hang out with the family and do a little bit of self-reflection. We are reaching to the year of 2018 very soon, so I'm just kind of trying to mentally prepare myself to make sure the channel is going strong and continues to grow in 2018. Trying to work on some projects and finish up a few in the background, also trying to make sure to catch up on any updates for the next expansion. And with Christmas break, I really just didn't have any time to edit some crazy big video. But I did find a forum post in the forums. I think it was on either World of Warcraft forums or MMO Champion. But it talked about maybe bringing back kind of an archaic system that I think might have some merit. And I'll let you guys decide that in comments below. They were talking about bringing back Cataclysm style system of having specs and having them specialized, like really specialized specializations. It sounds like a mouthful, but what if you had a specialization for PvP? Like, let's say old school rogues. Combat spec was the best PvE spec. It was the best raiding spec and best dungeon spec if you want to do damage in a PvE environment. The way it was built and the talents. I guess you could play combat for PvP, but it was mostly geared, and the way Blizzard balanced it was for PvE. For Subtlety, you were the PvP spec. You were designed for player versus player combat. And while you could do well in some PvE and raid situations, you were mostly a PvP spec. And then we had Assassination. It was kind of like that middle ground, middle child. It was really just a flavor of choice. It could do well in PvE. It could do well in PvP, as far as I remember, because I didn't play Rogue back in Cataclysm. This is just what I'm going off of forum posts from back in the day. You could play Assassination as well as you wanted. You could try to make the spec work for, again, PvP or PvE. It wasn't quite always the case, but people were, if you really wanted to, it's like playing an Outlaw in PvP right now. If you really wanted to make it happen, and you want to play some underdog specialization, you can try. You might succeed, but of course, no guarantee. So the person was talking about maybe bringing that kind of system back to the game. And while on one hand it is a bit of an archaic system, it's like talking about bringing back old school classic talents. Even though a lot of people would be happy about them, the average World of Warcraft community would just point to World of Warcraft Classic and the fact that it's coming. And some people might like the system, some people might not. But we do have these systems and people talking maybe about reverting. No guarantee. Blizzard isn't talking about it, it's just a few people suggesting it in the forum posts. But I do think that there is a little bit of merit to this kind of systems, and if you were to bring it back for whatever reason, I think it will be interesting. Because a lot of people talk about World of Warcraft and how they talk about, I want a balanced game, I want this game to be balanced. When we finally have this game balanced, why are so many classes doing so well in PvP or PvE? Look at the logs, rogues in the worst spot. A lot of people point to rogues, for example, in the mythic environment, and saying that rogues are literally at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to damage. Why are rogues parsing so terribly? Why are the logs for rogues as bad as they look? Are they really as bad as they look? And if you were to take a look, you would say, okay, well, how are rogues doing on mechanics? Maybe rogues just don't have the best mechanics. What are their 4-piece, 2-piece slots? Or do they have the best ones? Are people still in best lot gear? Maybe what are their gear? What are the legendaries? How are they building themselves? How are they approaching the fights? Maybe the specific mechanics that cause them to just not do as much damage. Now, if you were to have a specialized spec for PvE and a specialized spec for PvP, let's say you take that raiding situation with raids. You have, let's say, combat. Let's say you brought back the old school specs of rogues. You would have combat rogue geared, balanced, and have gear, 2-piece, 4-piece bonuses, and trinkets balanced around that one specialization. If you have just one spec that Blizzard has to make work in terms of damage and be competitive to others, then I feel like it's a lot harder for them to mess it up. And if that spec isn't doing well, I feel like the public outcry would be a lot bigger. But if there was just one spec to focus on for PvE, good chances are that one specialization that they're focusing on will probably inevitably come out to be the best for PvE, at least for that class, and will be parsing fairly better than its sister specs or brother specs, however you want to call it. Like, let's say combat was the best PvE spec. Subtlety could be played in some PvE situations. Assassination could be a flavor of choice, but no matter what, combat will be a specialization that you can always fall back on. You can always trust it to be able to go and get into a raid or a dungeon and always parse well and do well in terms of damage. With that in mind, I think it's kind of a noble idea to have specializations that could do well, no matter PvE or PvP, no matter the patch, no matter the situation. Blizzard always has to have one specialization that is a make it or break it for that class. You have to have at least one spec, always 100% work. So this way you would always have that guarantee that, yeah, rogues are always going to be good. They have at least one specialization geared and designed to do well in PvE. Same thing for PvP. No matter how imbalanced the game is, because Blizzard has to balance so many specs for PvP and PvE, if you have one spec that a developer team is focusing on to make the best PvP spec for that one class, then it'll be hard to mess it up. Again, I think some of the issues when it comes to balancing classes is we're trying to balance them for PvE and PvP, but there's so many specializations in the game that it makes it impossible. And they try to do it with a prune, but if you were to add more abilities, I mean, the headache from a development standpoint has to be enormous. It has to be a massive challenge to be able to get this right and do it properly. If you have a lot less specs to work with, then you might be able to nail whatever spec of focus you have, a PvE spec and a PvP spec, a lot more possibly, or a higher probability that you'll nail it. It'll be perfect. It'll be well played. And of course you would have the middle child spec. Let's say for, let's say Warlocks for Cataclysm. Back in Cataclysm, Demonology was the PvE raiding, dragon slaying, tank and spank spec. You were there for the dungeons and the raids. You did the most damage in that regard. Affliction was, while viable a little in PvE, was primarily a PvP spec. If you were playing PvP, you'll probably be rolling Affliction if you're somebody who was a main Warlock and was trying to push raiding. But then we have Destruction. Destruction was this weird child that kind of sort of worked in PvE, but not in every single fight and every single situation, and you would have to fall back on Demonology for some fights if you want to do well in damage. But it also could do somewhat okay in PvP if played right, but it wasn't quite Affliction at the same time. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't quite Affliction, which was designed for PvE. And people played Destruction back in the day. So I feel like if you have at least one spec that you can always rely on for PvP or PvE, generally the community would have themselves a belief that, hey, you can always succeed, whether you want to raid, dungeon, or whether you want to PvP, arenas, and battlegrounds. This way you would always have a more balanced game, and technically you could take that PvE spec into PvP or a PvP spec into PvE and it'll work in some fights. The main point of it would be that the spec isn't designed for it. If it works, and that's great. If it doesn't, then no loss. You will always have a spec that you can rely on. If you really want to do PvE, you can of course go play this PvE spec. If you really want to PvP, you can play the PvP. If you want to just do something weird and play that wonky PvE in PvP, or vice versa, you can do that. Or you can try that middle child spec that is kind of sort of, designed, has maybe some experimental features about it, maybe works really well in some arena teams and some PvP combinations that live in the game or that play in the game, but not a guarantee. You could choose it for purely flavor if you wanted to, but at that point it will be a personal decision to do that. So I don't know how I feel about that, but I feel like there's merit to this idea. The idea that maybe if you had one PvP spec, one PvE spec, you might actually be able to achieve balance or a semblance of balance. And of course, always having a flavor spec for players, let's say, that are more experienced or simply want something different from a class they already play a lot, I feel like would add a little bit of that curveball mechanic where that specialization could be viable. But personally, if we were to go back to that system, I would be unhappy. I kind of like the flavors of choice that we have for all our classes, and I kind of like being able to play Outlaw. It's not the best for PvE, and it's not the best for PvP either. But if you have the right gear, and if you spend as much time as I do, playing Outlaw, then you might actually achieve something. And achieving success, victories in arenas, as well as high numbers in raids once in a while is super exciting and rewarding when, you had to put in the effort, you had to put in the time. So I personally wouldn't be in for that kind of idea, but what do you guys think? I'd like to hear from you guys in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked it, please go ahead and give it a like. And if you enjoy my videos and want my channel to grow, giving videos likes allows them to reach a wider audience. I would appreciate if you guys simply gave the video a like if you want to help my channel grow. If you haven't subscribed yet, please go ahead, I put up 2 videos a day, except for this one that didn't feel like a video because Christmas. I stream regularly, and I try to make as much content as I can regarding PvP, 5.5.1.1 duels, as well as any updates for future patches and future expansions. If you guys want to hit the notification bell after hitting subscribe next to the subscribe button, please go ahead so you can catch every single live stream and every single video. And I stream daily except for Thursday, so if you want to catch streams, be sure to hit the notification bell. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully everybody had a Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, whatever the hell you celebrate. Hopefully you guys having a good one, and I'll see all of you in another video.